Okay, so part 2 of the video, we're picking up on question 4. So, it tells us capillaries are blood vessels in the body which join the arteries to the veins. They have walls which are 1 cell thick and so are able to exchange substances with the body cells. So, first part, name 2 substances that travel from the muscle cells to the blood in the capillaries. Now you can see I've underlined they're going from the muscle cells and into the blood. So, if things are leaving muscle cells and going into the blood, they're going to be waste products. So we've got lots of choices here. 4 possible things we could pick. So urea, carbon dioxide, water, or lactic acid. So 2 of those 4. All right, and really got to read it carefully because they're going from the muscle cells to the blood. We want things that are waste products the cell wants to get rid of. Okay. Then we get told glucose is one substance that travels from the blood in the capillaries to the body cells, and we have to explain how this happens. So pretty much the same explanation that runs throughout the whole exam, that glucose is going to move by diffusion. That's our first point, but because it's 2 marks we should really explain what does that actually mean. And so it's going to go from where there's a high concentration in the blood to a low concentration in the cells. So key that we should stress where there's a high concentration, where there's a low concentration, and the glucose is going to move from high to low. Okay, now question 5. This one's a tricky one because we've never really come across the idea of frogs or even tadpoles before, but we have talked about in lessons about fish and about how fish exchange substances with the water around them, and this is the same kind of ideas we're going to use for the tadpole. So the young stages of frogs are called tadpoles. The tadpoles live in fresh water. The drawings show a tadpole just before hatching and 3 days after hatching. Structure X helps in the exchange of substances. So we see that exchange of substances. That should really make us think if something's exchanging substances and it is in water, then it's got to have gills. Alright, so structure X is gills. And that's the key thing to getting the marks in the next part, is talking about how does the gills appearing help this tadpole. So the first part, nice and simple. So one substance other than food that the tadpole needs to exchange with the water in order to grow. Well, so it's going to either have to take in oxygen so it can respire, or it needs to release carbon dioxide so that it doesn't get poisoned by this, basically. So either of those would be fine. Okay, now it's this part where the gills come into things. So suggest how the change in the tadpole shown in the drawings help it to survive as it grows larger. And they give us some really clear hints. You should not refer to movement. So they're telling us that because you could think that maybe these are like little wings or little flippers that are helping it to move along, but they are not. Okay, they are helping for exchange of substances, so actually they are small gills. And the other hint, to gain full marks you should refer to structure X. So they want us to talk about it. So the first thing I've done after my little mistake is to say that structure X are gills and that they have little filaments on them. That bit's not that necessary, but just to say structure X, but they are gills. So now we just go through all the adaptations that gills have to help exchange substances or to help diffusion. So 1, they have a large surface area. 2, they'll have a good blood supply. 3, they'll have quite thin walls, which means a short diffusion pathway. And all those things together are going to help exchange or diffusion to happen faster. So it's a 4-mark question. You've got 5 possible points here, but you really needed to have the first one to get the others, to recognize that structure X are gills. But if you did talk about these particular adaptations, then you could get some of the marks. Okay, so on to question 6. So the diagram shows 4 ways in which molecules may move into and out of a cell, and the dots show the concentration of molecules. So we see lots of dots, high concentration, not so many dots, low concentration. It says the cell is respiring aerobically. So which arrow represents the movement of oxygen molecules? Well, you can see if the cell's respiring aerobically, then it needs to take in oxygen, needs to take in glucose, and it needs to get rid of carbon dioxide and water vapor. So the movement of oxygen molecules, we're going to want it to come into the cell, and diffusion is going to happen if we go from a high concentration to a low. And out of the 4 diagrams, there's only 2, A and C, where the substance is moving into the cell, and the only one where it's a high concentration to low concentration is A. So high concentration, low concentration. Okay, so that's the one, that's the movement of oxygen molecules. Then movement of carbon dioxide molecules, well, the cell's going to want to get rid of carbon dioxide. But again, it's going to happen by diffusion. So this time, we need to look at these 2 arrows. So they're moving out of the cell, but because it's diffusion, we want high concentration to low concentration. So it's going to be B this time. Okay. Over the page. So name the process by which these gases move into and out of the cell. Well, I've said it a lot of times now. It is diffusion, going from high concentration to low concentration. Then, which arrow represents the active uptake of sugar molecules by the cell? So sugar molecules, we could simply also say that those are bits of glucose, and glucose needs to go in, but because it says active uptake, that means energy is going to be needed to get the glucose inside. So again, we want glucose to go in, but active uptake is from a low concentration to a high concentration. I said active uptake. We could equally just say active transport, and so that's why I chose C, because that's the one showing that the glucose or the sugar molecules are going from low to high concentration. So the uptake of these sugar molecules is done by active transport, which goes from low to high concentration. Okay, now this next question was only for higher tier pupils, so if your teacher didn't explicitly tell you you needed to do it, and you think you're not sure if you need to, then you don't need to mark this part. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is just talk through the data, all the things that this graph is actually showing us. So it says the graph shows the uptake of carbon dioxide and the release of carbon dioxide by a bean plant on a hot summer's day. So first thing I'm looking at, mass of carbon dioxide taken in from the atmosphere per hour in arbitrary units. So a plant is going to take in carbon dioxide when it wants to carry out photosynthesis. And that's because carbon dioxide is a reactant of photosynthesis. So this part of the graph is all about the photosynthesis. This part, mass of carbon dioxide given out to the atmosphere, the plant's going to give out carbon dioxide when it's respiring, because carbon dioxide is a product of respiration. So throughout the day, we're seeing these kind of quantities change really. So we'll kind of come back to look at different times, but at midnight we can see that there's actually quite a lot, 11 units of carbon dioxide being given out. And then if we go on, we see that the amount given out starts to decrease, and then in the kind of middle part of the day, or the big part of the day, we're seeing that the amount of carbon dioxide actually being taken in is much higher. And that's really because midnight to about, well, 7ish a.m. it's not going to be that bright, and then from about, I don't know, 8 p.m. to about midnight, again, it's not going to be that bright, and if it's not very bright, the plant can't really photosynthesize. So when there's lots of light between these 2 points of the day, there's lots of photosynthesis, so lots of carbon dioxide being taken in. However, when it's quite dark, all right, and the plant can't photosynthesize, then it's going to still be respiring, and so it's overall going to give carbon dioxide out. Now, all of that will help us really understand how to answer the questions. So, first one, at which 2 times in the day did the rate of photosynthesis exactly match the rate of respiration? So if the rates are matching each other, then that means that overall there's no carbon dioxide going into the plant or going out into the atmosphere. So if we flick back, we're looking for times where there is no carbon dioxide being taken in, no carbon dioxide being given out. And there are 2 times. So right here, where we're at 0, and right here. Now, the scale was a little bit tricky to read, so it was actually acceptable to say any time between 7:15 and 7:45 a.m. for your first time, and then 7:15 to 7:45 p.m. for the second time. So any time in between those, would have been fine, because the scale was a little bit tricky to read. Okay, next question. The bean plant respires at the same rate all through the 24-hour period. So the rate of respiration is always the same. So how much carbon dioxide is released each hour during respiration? So the only way really to figure this out is we need to look at parts where photosynthesis is not happening, where photosynthesis is not involved, where the only thing the plant is doing is respiring. And that's why I picked out these 2 parts here, where it's really dark, there's no photosynthesis happening, just respiration. So here around about midnight, here kind of from midnight up to maybe 5 a.m. And when we look at these 2 parts, we see that there are 11 units of carbon dioxide being given out. And so that's going to be happening throughout the entire day, but we're only able to see when there's no photosynthesis happening what would be the rate of respiration. So that's why it's 11 units. Okay, and that's what I've got there, 11 units. So second part of this little bit, how much carbon dioxide is used by photosynthesis in the hour beginning at 3 p.m. So again, we'll flick back. So we're in the scale for me.
When I get my ruler out, I think 3 p.m. is around about there. And around about there, we've got 22 units of carbon dioxide that are being taken in from the atmosphere. But what we should also keep in mind is that there are also these 11 units from the respiration part. So if we look at how much carbon dioxide is used by photosynthesis in the hour beginning at 3 p.m., well, we see overall there's about 22 units being given out overall. But that's going to also, we've also got to take into account that the plant is going to be giving out 11 because of respiration. So overall, it's probably going to be taking in it's going to be taking in a combination of the 2. So that's why I've got 11 plus 22. Now, because the scale was hard to read, you were allowed anything between 21.5 and 22. So for your final answer for this, anything between 32.5 and 33 would have been acceptable. Okay, the total amount of carbon dioxide taken in by the bean plant was greater than the total amount of carbon dioxide given out by the bean plant. And you have to explain in detail why this was important. So the plant is taking in carbon dioxide so it can photosynthesize, so it can make glucose. And the reason why it needs to take in more carbon dioxide than it gives out is so that there's more photosynthesis happening than respiration. Because if all of the glucose made in photosynthesis was used for respiration, then the plant would have no glucose left to do anything else other than just respire. So the plant needs more carbon dioxide in so that it can photosynthesize more than it respires, and that means that it can make more glucose than it actually uses for respiration. And the reason why it needs to make more glucose than it uses is for a whole host of reasons. So at its most basic, so the plant can actually make new cells so it can grow, potentially so it can store some of the glucose as food,
so that it could use some of the glucose to make maybe amino acids, or to make proteins, or to make chlorophyll. So that is why the plant has to take in more carbon dioxide, because it needs to photosynthesize more to end up making more food than it uses, or more glucose than it uses, to carry out all these other processes. Okay, so that's the end of this week's marking video. Thank you very much for watching.